Foundations of glass. Bryce Sullivan stood at the window of his custom-designed home office, staring at the rain lashing against the glass. The storm outside mirrored the turbulence within. 10 years of marriage had culminated in this moment. This hollow, aching silence punctuated only by the distant sounds of his 8-year-old daughter Abby, playing in her room. Bryce had built this house with his own hands. As the owner of Sullivan Construction, he'd poured everything into creating the perfect sanctuary for his family. The irony wasn't lost on him that the foundation was now cracking beneath his feet. His phone buzzed with another message from his wife Nicole. Another excuse for why she wouldn't be home for dinner. Another lie. Late client meeting. Don't wait up. Bryce set the phone down without replying. 3 months of late meetings and work emergencies had formed a pattern too obvious to ignore. Nicole, once vibrant and affectionate, had become a ghost in their marriage, present in photographs around the house, but nowhere in their shared life. "Dad," Abby's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed fox. Her dark hair, so like his own, was pulled into messy pigtails. "Can we have pancakes for dinner since Mom's not coming?" He smiled, the first genuine smile of the day. "Sure, sweetheart. With chocolate chips." Her eyes lit up as she nodded enthusiastically. As they moved to the kitchen, Bryce watched his daughter carefully measuring flour into a bowl, her tongue poking out in concentration. Abby was his world, the one pure thing in a life that had become increasingly complicated. The signs had been subtle at first. Nicole changing her phone password. New clothes. A sudden interest in fitness that had her joining a CrossFit gym. Perfume that wasn't for him. Late nights and weekend self-care, activities that never included her family. "Dad, you're burning the pancake." Abby's alarmed voice snapped him back to reality. As they sat at the kitchen island eating slightly charred pancakes, Bryce studied his daughter. "How are things at school, Abby? Do you like your new teacher?" Abby shrugged, pushing a piece of pancake through a puddle of syrup. "She's okay. Ms. Boyd asks a lot of questions about you and Mom." Bryce's fork paused midway to his mouth. "What kind of questions?" "If you guys fight. If Mom cries. Weird stuff." She looked up at him with innocent eyes. "I told her you don't fight, 'cause you're barely ever home at the same time anymore." The observation hit Bryce like a physical blow. Children noticed everything. Later that night, after tucking Abby in, Bryce descended into his basement workshop. Unlike the polished upper floors of their home, this was his sanctuary: raw concrete, exposed beams, tools meticulously organized on pegboards. He opened his laptop and clicked on a folder labeled Security Footage. As the owner of a construction company, Bryce had installed state-of-the-art security throughout their home during the build. A precaution, he'd told Nicole. What he hadn't mentioned was the coverage extended to every corner of their property, including the garage and driveway. He scrolled to 3 days ago, Tuesday. Nicole had claimed a dinner with clients. The timestamp showed 11:42 p.m. when her car pulled into the driveway. She wasn't alone. A tall man with a muscular build exited the passenger side. They kissed, not a friendly peck, but deeply, passionately, before Nicole checked her surroundings and hurried him inside. Bryce's hands trembled as he forwarded through hours of footage. The man left at 4:30 a.m., Nicole seeing him off with another embrace at the door. He closed the laptop, his mind oddly calm despite the storm raging within. Bryce Sullivan was methodical by nature. He didn't fly into rages, he planned. He built. He executed. And now, he would deconstruct. Chapter 2. The Hidden Blueprint. The CrossFit gym occupied a converted warehouse in the industrial district. Bryce parked his truck across the street, watching members filter in for the 7 a.m. class. Nicole's silver SUV was already in the parking lot. The glass front allowed him a clear view of the interior. Rows of equipment, motivational quotes splashed across concrete walls, and the morning class gathering around a muscular instructor who was demonstrating proper form for deadlifts. Dustin Mercer, 32, former college athlete turned fitness guru, owner of CrossFit Revolution and, apparently, the man sleeping with Bryce's wife. Bryce had spent the week gathering information. Credit card statements showing Nicole's membership beginning 3 months ago. The frequent coffee charges at the cafe next door. The boutique lingerie purchases that Bryce had never seen worn. He watched through the window as Dustin moved behind Nicole, adjusting her form with unnecessarily lingering hands. The familiar way she leaned back into him. The shared smile. Bryce didn't confront them. Instead, he drove to his construction site where his crew was breaking ground on a new luxury condo development. Work had always been his refuge, and today was no different as he buried himself in blueprints and permit discussions with his project manager, Ray Dominguez. "You look like shit, boss," Ray said during their coffee break, his Mexican accent more pronounced when concerned. "Everything okay at home?" Bryce had known Ray for 15 years, since they were both working as laborers for a corrupt contractor who routinely stiffed his workers. They'd started Sullivan Construction together, with Ray becoming Bryce's right-hand man and closest friend. "Nicole's cheating on me," Bryce said flatly. Ray's expression darkened. "You sure?" "Saw it with my own eyes. Got it on camera." "What are you going to do?" Bryce took a slow sip of his coffee. "I'm going to find out how deep this goes before I make any moves. You need anything, man? I'm here. You know that." Ray clapped a hand on his shoulder. That evening, Bryce maintained the charade of normalcy when Nicole returned home. They ate dinner as a family, Abby chattering about her day at school, while Nicole asked perfunctory questions, her attention frequently drifting to her phone. After Abby was asleep, Bryce sat Nicole down in the living room. "We need to talk about us," he began. Nicole's expression immediately became guarded. "What about us? You're distant. You're gone all the time." Abby's noticed. "I've noticed." He kept his voice even, revealing nothing of what he knew. "I'm busy with work, Bryce. The real estate market is crazy right now." Nicole was a realtor, successful in her own right, though nowhere near as financially stable as Bryce's construction company. "Is that all it is? Work?" Her eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking if there's something else going on that we need to address." He watched her carefully, noting the slight flush creeping up her neck, a tell she'd had since they met in college. "Like what? Just say what you're thinking, Bryce. Are you happy with me? With our marriage?" Nicole sighed dramatically. "I'm tired, Bryce. It's been a long day, and I don't have the energy for this conversation right now." She stood, effectively ending the discussion. "I'm going to take a shower and go to bed." As she walked away, Bryce noticed her phone left on the couch. A calculated move? A test? Either way, when he picked it up, the screen was locked. The password, once their anniversary date, had been changed months ago. The next morning, while Nicole was at the gym and Abby was at school, Bryce made his move. He drove to the bank and opened a new account in his name only, transferring half of their joint savings. He contacted his lawyer, Philip Randall, a shrewd man who had handled Sullivan Construction's legal matters since its inception. "I need divorce papers drawn up," Bryce said without preamble. "And I want to understand my options regarding custody." Philip's voice remained professional despite the bombshell. "Full custody or joint?" "Full," Bryce said firmly. "But don't file anything yet. I need more information first." The following week consisted of careful intelligence gathering. Bryce hired a private investigator, set up additional monitoring of Nicole's activities, and systematically documented every inconsistency in her stories, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy at home. He discovered the affair had been going on for nearly 6 months, not 3 as he'd initially suspected. Dustin wasn't Nicole's first indiscretion, merely the current one. And most damning of all, she'd been taking Abby to his apartment, introducing her to Dustin as Mommy's special friend. That night, when Nicole returned home, Bryce was waiting in the kitchen, divorce papers spread across the island counter where they'd eaten burnt pancakes just weeks before. "What is this?" Nicole asked, though her tone suggested she knew exactly what she was looking at. "Exactly what it looks like," Bryce replied calmly. "I know about Dustin. I know about the others before him. I know everything, Nicole." Her expression cycled rapidly through shock, denial, and finally, a cold calculation that Bryce had never seen before. "You don't know anything," she hissed. "And you'll regret this." Bryce slid a USB drive across the counter. "Everything's here. The footage of you bringing him to our home. The hotel receipts. The text messages. You can keep denying it, but the evidence doesn't lie." Nicole's composure cracked. "So what? You weren't exactly husband of the year, Bryce. Always at work. Always putting your precious company first. I was building a future for us, for Abby. A future where I was always alone." Her voice rose. "Do you know how many school events you missed? How many nights I went to bed alone?" Bryce remained unervingly calm. "If you were unhappy, you could have talked to me. We could have worked on it." Instead, you chose to betray our vows, to bring other men into our daughter's life. Abby loves Dustin, Nicole spat. He pays attention to her, which is more than I can say for you. The statement hit its mark, but Bryce refused to show his pain. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm seeking full custody of Abby. Nicole laughed, the sound harsh and unfamiliar. Good luck with that. No judge is going to take a child from her mother and give her to a workaholic father. We'll see. Bryce gathered the papers. You have until the end of the week to decide if you want to do this amicably or not. For Abby's sake, I hope you choose wisely. Nicole's face contorted with rage. You think you can threaten me? You have no idea what I'm capable of, Bryce. None. As she stormed out of the kitchen, Bryce remained at the counter, his expression impassive. Only his white-knuckled grip on the edge betrayed the fury building within. The game had begun. Chapter 3, Demolition. 3 days after confronting Nicole, Bryce returned home from work to find the house empty and a note on the kitchen counter. I've taken Abby to stay with my mother for a while. We need space from you. My lawyer will be in touch. The careful control Bryce had maintained shattered. He called Nicole repeatedly, each call going straight to voicemail. He texted, demanding to know where his daughter was, but received no response. Finally, he drove to Patricia Lynch's house, Nicole's mother, a 20-minute drive across town. Patricia's silver Honda was in the driveway alongside Nicole's SUV. Bryce pounded on the front door until Patricia answered, her thin face pinched with hostility. Where's my daughter? Bryce demanded. She's safe, which is more than she would be with you. Patricia snapped. Nicole told me everything. How you've been threatening her. How controlling you've become. That's a lie and you know it. Bryce's voice was dangerously low. I want to see Abby. Now. She doesn't want to see you. You've upset her with all this divorce nonsense. From inside the house, Bryce heard Abby's voice. Daddy? Is that Daddy? Patricia tried to close the door, but Bryce blocked it with his foot. Abby. Sweetheart, I'm here. Nicole appeared behind her mother, her expression cold. You need to leave, Bryce. I filed a temporary restraining order. You're not supposed to be here. A restraining order? On what grounds? Bryce's disbelief was palpable. Domestic abuse, Nicole said, her voice steady but her eyes gleaming with triumph. You've been threatening me, controlling me. I have witnesses. Bryce felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. What witnesses? That's completely fabricated. My mother has seen your temper. So has your father. And I have the therapy records showing how your behavior has affected Abby. Therapy records? What are you talking about? Abby isn't in therapy. Nicole's smile was chilling. She's been seeing Dr. Montgomery for 6 weeks now. She's been very helpful in documenting the emotional distress your controlling behavior has caused. Bryce struggled to process this new information. You enrolled our daughter in therapy without telling me? And you've been coaching her to say I'm abusive? His voice rose in disbelief. Nobody coached her, Bryce. She just told the truth. Nicole stepped forward. Now leave before I call the police and report you for violating the restraining order. Dad. Abby appeared in the hallway behind her mother, her small face confused and frightened. Abby, go back inside. Nicole ordered without turning around. Princess, it's okay, Bryce called to his daughter. Everything's going to be okay. I love you so much. That's enough, Patricia interjected, physically blocking his view of Abby. You heard Nicole. Leave now, or we're calling the police. Bryce backed away, his mind racing. As he returned to his truck, he saw the curtain in the front window move. Abby watching him leave, her tiny hand pressed against the glass. The following days were a blur of legal meetings and desperate attempts to see his daughter. The temporary restraining order was indeed real, based on Nicole's unsubstantiated claims of emotional abuse and controlling behavior. She had painted Bryce as a workaholic tyrant who monitored her movements and isolated her from friends and family. Most shocking was the appearance of Bryce's father, Douglas Sullivan, at Nicole's side during the preliminary custody hearing. Douglas, a retired judge himself, testified that he had always been concerned about his son's obsessive tendencies and flashes of temper. The betrayal cut deeper than Bryce could have imagined. His relationship with his father had always been complicated. Douglas had been emotionally distant throughout Bryce's childhood, more concerned with his judicial career than his family. When Bryce's mother died of cancer 10 years ago, the already strained relationship had deteriorated further. But to have his own father testify against him in a custody battle? It was inconceivable. Outside the courtroom, Bryce confronted Douglas. How could you do this to me? To your own son? Douglas straightened his silk tie, his silver hair immaculately styled despite his 70 years. Nicole came to me for help. She's afraid of you, Bryce. And frankly, I've always seen concerning patterns in your behavior. What patterns? Being dedicated to my business? Creating a stable home for my family? What exactly have I done that was so terrible? You're too much like your mother, Douglas said dismissively. Too emotional. Too intense. Nicole deserves better, and so does Abby. The statement landed like a physical blow. Douglas had always resented his late wife's passionate nature, her unwillingness to play the perfect judge's wife. You're doing this because I remind you of her, Bryce realized aloud. You couldn't control her, and you can't control me. Douglas's expression hardened. I'm doing what's best for my granddaughter. Something you might consider for once. As his father walked away, Bryce felt something harden within him. The betrayal was complete. Wife, father, even his daughter was being turned against him. The temporary custody arrangement granted Nicole physical custody, with Bryce allowed only supervised visitation once a week. During his first supervised visit with Abby at a sterile family services center, Bryce was heartbroken to find his normally exuberant daughter withdrawn and cautious. Princess, how are you? I've missed you so much, he said, kneeling to her level. Abby glanced nervously at the social worker observing them from across the room. I'm okay, she mumbled. Mommy says you're sick and need help. Bryce fought to keep his expression neutral despite the rage building inside. I'm not sick, sweetheart. I'm just sad because I miss you. Grandma says you were mean to Mommy. And Grandpa Douglas says you have anger issues like Grandma did. Abby, none of that is true. I love you and your mom very much. I would never hurt either of you. Abby looked down at her hands. Then why did you make Mommy cry all the time? Why did you spy on her? Bryce realized with growing horror the extent of the poisoning of his daughter's mind. Abby, look at me, he said gently. Have you ever seen me hurt Mommy? Have you ever been afraid of me? She hesitated, then shook her head. People sometimes say things that aren't true when they're angry or sad. But I promise you, I've never done anything to hurt you or Mommy. Their hour together passed quickly, with Abby gradually warming up, but still clearly confused by the conflicting narratives. As the visit ended, she hugged him tightly and whispered, Dustin makes me watch them exercise. I don't like it. Before Bryce could ask what she meant, the social worker announced their time was up. That night, Bryce sat in his empty house, surrounded by the remnants of the family life that had been stolen from him. The casual cruelty of Nicole's betrayal, his father's abandonment, and worst of all, his daughter's confusion and pain. It all coalesced into a cold, hard resolve. They had taken everything from him. His family, his reputation, his dignity. Now, he would take everything from them. Chapter 4, Foundation of Vengeance. Bryce Sullivan had always been a builder. He approached problems, assess, plan, execute. Now, facing the systematic destruction of his life, he applied the same principles to his revenge. His first move was securing the right legal representation. Philip Randall was an excellent corporate attorney, but Bryce needed a shark for family court. He found Marian Keller, a divorce attorney notorious for her aggressive tactics and unparalleled success rate. They're playing dirty, Marian observed during their first meeting, reviewing the restraining order and temporary custody arrangement. But they've overplayed their hand. False accusations leave a trail. What do you mean? The therapist, Dr. Montgomery. If she's been seeing your daughter for 6 weeks as claimed, there should be insurance claims, session notes, a formal diagnosis. If Nicole enrolled Abby without your knowledge or consent, that's a violation of your parental rights. For the first time in weeks, Bryce felt a glimmer of hope. How do we prove it? We subpoena the records and depose the therapist. Marianne's smile was predatory. But first, we need to understand exactly what's happening in that household when you're not around. Bryce hesitated. I don't want to put Abby through more trauma. Neither do I. But right now, your daughter is living with a mother who's actively alienating her from you and potentially exposing her to inappropriate situations with this boyfriend. We need evidence. That evening, Bryce met with Leonard Watts, a former military intelligence officer turned private investigator. The man's weathered face remained impassive as Bryce explained the situation. I need to know what's happening in that house. How Dustin interacts with my daughter. What they're telling her about me. Leonard nodded. Surveillance on a child is delicate territory. I won't do anything that could further traumatize your daughter, but I can monitor the adults and their interactions with her in public spaces. That's fair. I also need background on Dustin Mercer. Criminal record, financial situation, previous relationships, everything. What about your father? The judge. Bryce's jaw tightened. Him too. I want to know why he turned on me so completely. Over the next 2 weeks, Leonard's investigation yielded disturbing results. Dustin Mercer had 2 previous relationships that ended with allegations of emotional abuse, though no charges were ever filed. He had a DUI from 5 years ago and was currently behind on child support payments to an ex-girlfriend in Houston. More concerning were the observations of Dustin's interactions with Abby. During a trip to the park, Leonard photographed Dustin grabbing Abby's arm roughly when she wanted to continue playing rather than leave. Another time, he was overheard yelling at her for spilling a drink in Nicole's car. The most damning evidence came from Leonard's investigation into Dr. Vivian Montgomery. The therapist had been Nicole's college roommate, a clear conflict of interest she hadn't disclosed to the court. Furthermore, there was no record of Abby's therapy sessions being billed through insurance, suggesting the treatment was off the books. Bryce brought this information to Mary Ann, who immediately filed motions to invalidate Dr. Montgomery's testimony and reports. "This is a good start," she said, "but we need more. The allegations against you are serious, even if they're fabricated. Judges err on the side of caution when children are involved. What about my father? Did Leonard find anything there?" Mary Ann's expression became guarded. "That's complicated. It appears Judge Sullivan has been having financial difficulties since his retirement. His investment portfolio took significant hits in the last market downturn. And 3 months ago, he received a wire transfer of $50,000 from an LLC that traces back to Nicole." Bryce felt the blood drain from his face. She bribed him. It's disguised as an investment in a property Nicole claims to be developing. But the property doesn't exist. Mary Ann leaned forward. "Your wife didn't just betray you with an affair, Bryce. This was a coordinated attack to destroy you and take your daughter." The part of Bryce's brain cataloged this information, filing it away as another component of his plan. But beneath that, rage burned white-hot. "What do we do with this?" "We keep building our case. The custody hearing is in 3 weeks. Between now and then, we gather every scrap of evidence we can. And when we walk into that courtroom, we're prepared for war." Bryce's next supervised visitation with Abby revealed new concerns. His daughter was quieter than before, her normally bright eyes dull with fatigue. "Princess, are you sleeping okay?" he asked gently. Abby shrugged, picking at a loose thread on her jeans. "Dustin and Mommy are loud at night. And sometimes they fight." "Fight how?" "Yelling. Breaking things." She looked up, her expression suddenly fearful. "I'm not supposed to talk about it. Mommy says what happens at home is private." Bryce struggled to maintain his composure. "Abby, you can always tell me anything. Always. No matter what anyone else says. Dr. Montgomery says I should only tell her things, not you. She says you'll twist my words." "Do you know what twist your words means?" Abby shook her head. "It means changing what you say to mean something else. Have I ever done that to you?" "No." Her voice was small. "I promise I never will. The truth is very important, especially now." As their visit ended, Abby suddenly grabbed his hand. "Daddy, I don't like it when Dustin's there. He scares me sometimes." The admission sent ice through Bryce's veins. "What does he do that scares you?" But the social worker was already announcing their time was up, and Abby was escorted away before she could answer. That night, Bryce couldn't sleep. Abby's words haunted him, along with his powerlessness to protect her. He paced his workshop until dawn, the outline of a plan taking shape in his mind. The next day, he reached out to Ray Dominguez. "I need a favor, and it's not strictly legal." Ray didn't hesitate. "Name it." "I need surveillance equipment installed near Nicole's mother's house. Nothing invasive, just enough to monitor who comes and goes, record any disturbances. Consider it done." "And Bryce?" "Whatever you need, man. Whatever it takes." The surveillance proved invaluable. Within days, they captured audio of a violent argument between Nicole and Dustin, with Patricia Lynch clearly heard telling Abby to go to your room and turn up your iPad to drown out the fighting. Most damning was footage of Dustin arriving at the house visibly intoxicated, stumbling up the steps and shouting for Nicole at 2 a.m., with Abby visible at her bedroom window, clearly frightened by the disturbance. Leonard Watts combined this with his other findings into a comprehensive report that painted a disturbing picture. A household where Abby was exposed to adult conflicts, emotional manipulation, and potentially unsafe conditions. "This is exactly what we needed," Marianne said when Bryce presented the evidence. "But we need to be strategic about how we use it. If we reveal our hand too early, they'll have time to manufacture explanations. So what's the plan? We wait for the perfect moment. Let them build their case against you. Let them think they're winning. Then, when they're confident and comfortable, we spring the trap." Bryce nodded, understanding the strategy. It was like demolition. Identify the structural weak points, place the charges carefully, then bring the whole thing down at once. As the custody hearing approached, Nicole escalated her campaign against Bryce. Rumors spread through their social circle about his alleged controlling behavior and temper. Business associates received anonymous emails suggesting Sullivan Construction engaged in questionable practices. Even his banker called, concerned about reports of financial irregularities. It was a scorched earth approach designed to isolate Bryce completely. And it was working. But Bryce remained focused on the endgame. While Nicole was busy destroying his social life, he was meticulously documenting every false claim, manipulative action, instance of parental alienation. 3 days before the hearing, Leonard called with a troubling update. "I'm sending you some photos. They're not easy to look at." The images loaded on Bryce's phone. Abby with a distinct bruise on her forearm, shaped like fingertips. Another showing a small bruise on her shoulder. Nothing life-threatening, but clearly concerning. When were these taken? Yesterday, at her school playground. The teacher seemed concerned, but didn't intervene. Bryce's hands shook with rage. "Did you report this?" "Not yet. Legally, I'm required to report suspected child abuse, but I wanted to consult with you first. Given the complexity of your case, an anonymous report might be more strategic. Make the report, and give me every frame of footage you have showing those injuries." Leonard's voice was grave. "Bryce, be careful. Don't do anything that could jeopardize your position. I'm not going to do anything stupid, but I am going to make sure my daughter is safe." The anonymous report triggered a visit from Child Protective Services to Patricia's house the next day. Nicole immediately called Bryce, livid. "You bastard. You called CPS on me." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Bryce replied calmly, recording the call as Marianne had advised him to do with all interactions. "They're saying Abby has bruises. That someone reported possible abuse. You're really stooping this low. If Abby has bruises, maybe you should be more concerned about how she got them than who reported them." Nicole's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "You'll regret this, Bryce. When I'm done, you'll never see her again." The threat only strengthened Bryce's resolve. The pieces were in place. The hearing was 2 days away, and he was prepared to burn down the world to get his daughter back. Chapter 5: Structural Failure. The morning of the custody hearing dawned clear and cold. Bryce dressed carefully in a conservative Navy suit, mentally preparing for the battle ahead. He arrived at the courthouse early, watching as the other players took their positions. Nicole entered with her attorney, Carl Winston, a flashy divorce lawyer known for his theatrical courtroom style. She wore a modest beige dress that screamed, responsible mother, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Gone were the designer outfits and elaborate styling she'd favored during their marriage. Patricia Lynch trailed behind them, her perpetual scowl deepening when she spotted Bryce. Douglas Sullivan arrived separately, nodding curtly to Nicole's party but avoiding his son's gaze entirely. Marianne touched Bryce's arm. "Remember the strategy. Stay calm, no matter what they say. Don't react, don't interrupt. Let them think they're winning until it's time to spring our trap." Judge Helena Harmon's courtroom was wood-paneled and formal, the atmosphere tense as both parties took their seats. Bryce noticed Dr. Vivian Montgomery slip in just before proceedings began, carrying a portfolio and wearing an expression of practiced concern. As expected, Carl Winston painted Bryce as a controlling, work-obsessed father whose surveillance of his wife indicated dangerous possessiveness. Nicole testified tearfully about feeling constantly watched and afraid to disagree with him. Patricia Lynch took the stand next, describing instances where Bryce had allegedly shown his temper, slamming doors, raising his voice, making threatening gestures. Each accusation was a fabrication, but delivered with such conviction that Bryce could see Judge Harmon's expression growing increasingly concerned. Then came the moment he'd been dreading, his father's testimony. Douglas Sullivan cut an impressive figure in his bespoke suit, his voice carrying the authoritative tone developed over 30 years on the bench. "Your Honor, it pains me deeply to testify against my own son," he began, his performance worthy of an Oscar. "But I cannot in good conscience remain silent when my granddaughter's welfare is at stake. She said I was a terrible father and filed for sole custody," Bryce muttered to Marianne, who squeezed his arm in warning to remain silent. In court, her mother testified, "He's unstable, awful." My own father agreed with them. The judge looked at me with disdain. Douglas continued his character assassination, describing Bryce as having shown worrying signs of instability since childhood. He claimed Bryce had inherited his mother's emotional volatility and had never learned to control his temper. As a former judge myself, Douglas intoned gravely, "I've seen the damage done to children raised in homes with emotional abuse. I believe my granddaughter would be at significant risk in Bryce's sole custody." Bryce listened, stone-faced, as his father betrayed him completely. Beside him, Marianne took meticulous notes, occasionally whispering reassurances. "Your Honor," Carl Winston announced after Douglas stepped down, "we have one final witness whose testimony we believe is crucial to these proceedings. Dr. Vivian Montgomery has been treating Abby Sullivan for the past 2 months and has concerning insights into the child's emotional state." Dr. Montgomery took the stand, her credentials recited for the record: Ph.D. in clinical psychology, 15 years of experience in child psychology, numerous publications on childhood trauma. What wasn't mentioned? Her friendship with Nicole or the absence of official treatment records. "Dr. Montgomery, please describe your professional relationship with Abby Sullivan," Winston prompted. "I began seeing Abby approximately 8 weeks ago, after her mother noticed concerning behavioral changes. Abby was having nightmares, showing increased anxiety, and expressing fear about returning to her father's home during discussions about the separation." "And what did you discover during your sessions with Abby?" Dr. Montgomery adopted a grave expression. "Abby exhibits several signs of emotional distress consistent with exposure to a controlling, unpredictable home environment. She's fearful of making mistakes, constantly seeks approval, and displays anxiety when discussing her father." Winston nodded sympathetically. "Did Abby ever express specific concerns about her father?" "She was initially reluctant to discuss her home life, which is common in children experiencing emotional abuse. However, through therapeutic techniques, including art therapy, Abby began to express her feelings more openly." Winston approached with a folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into Evidence Exhibit C, a drawing created by Abby during one of her sessions with Dr. Montgomery." The bailiff delivered the folder to Judge Harmon, who examined its contents with a deepening frown. "Dr. Montgomery, could you describe this drawing for the court?" "Certainly. This drawing was created during our 6th session. I asked Abby to draw what makes her feel scared or unsafe. She drew this picture, which depicts a male figure with his mouth open in what appears to be shouting. She titled it, "When Mommy's Boyfriend Yells." The courtroom fell silent. Winston froze, clearly blindsided by the response. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that title?" "When Mommy's Boyfriend Yells," Dr. Montgomery repeated, her own confusion now evident. Abby explained that her mother's friend Dustin often shouts when he's angry, and it frightens her. Nicole lunged forward in her seat. "That's not," she began, before her attorney grabbed her arm. The bailiff stepped forward, positioning himself between Nicole and the witness stand. Judge Harmon looked sharply at Winston. "Counselor, am I to understand you entered this evidence without reviewing it first?" Winston tugged at his collar. "Your Honor, there appears to be some confusion. The drawing was represented to me as depicting Mr. Sullivan, not anyone else." "May I see the drawing?" Marianne requested, rising from her seat. Judge Harmon examined the drawing again, then nodded to the bailiff to deliver it to Bryce's attorney. Marianne studied it, then passed it to Bryce. The crude crayon drawing showed a man with bulging muscles and an angry red face, looming over a small figure hiding behind what appeared to be a couch. The words, "when mommy's boyfriend yells," were written in a child's uneven handwriting at the top. "Your Honor," Marianne said, "in light of this evidence, which directly contradicts the petitioner's claims, we request an immediate recess to confer with our client." Granted. This court will recess for 30 minutes. Judge Harmon's gaze swept over Nicole's party, her expression now skeptical. "When we reconvene, I expect a full explanation of this discrepancy." In a small conference room, Marianne could barely contain her excitement. "This is better than we could have hoped for. They just destroyed their own case." Bryce stared at the drawing, his daughter's fear evident in every crayon stroke. "This is just the beginning. I want to present all of our evidence now, the surveillance footage, the bribery documentation, everything." "Absolutely. They're in disarray, and Judge Harmon is already questioning their credibility. This is the perfect time to strike." When court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted palpably. Winston attempted to salvage the situation, claiming the drawing had been mislabeled and suggesting Abby was confused about who had frightened her. Marianne rose, her expression composed. "Your Honor, before Mr. Winston continues attempting to obscure the truth, we would like to present evidence that directly contradicts virtually every claim made by the petitioner today." Over the next hour, Bryce's team dismantled Nicole's case. They presented the surveillance footage showing Dustin's drunken tirades. They revealed Dr. Montgomery's personal connection to Nicole and the absence of legitimate treatment records. They documented multiple instances of Nicole actively alienating Abby from her father. Most devastating was the financial evidence. Bank records showing the transfer from Nicole's shell company to Douglas Sullivan, emails between them discussing their arrangement, and Douglas's subsequent financial recovery. "Your Honor," Marianne concluded, "what we've witnessed today is not a good faith attempt to protect a child, but a calculated conspiracy to deprive her of her father through false accusations, manipulated evidence, and what appears to be judicial bribery." Judge Harmon's expression had grown increasingly thunderous throughout the presentation. She turned to Nicole's table. "Mr. Winston, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Winston, visibly sweating, conferred hastily with Nicole before standing. "Your Honor, we request a continuance to examine this new evidence and prepare an appropriate response." "Denied," Judge Harmon said flatly. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm inclined to believe Mr. Sullivan has been the victim of a coordinated attempt to deprive him of his parental rights through fraudulent means." She turned to Bryce. "Mr. Sullivan, I am granting you temporary sole physical custody of your daughter, effective immediately. Mrs. Sullivan will have supervised visitation only, pending further investigation of these serious allegations." Nicole let out a strangled cry. "You can't do this. He manipulated everything. Mrs. Sullivan, control yourself or I will have you removed," Judge Harmon warned. "Additionally, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of possible criminal charges including perjury, witness tampering, and attempted bribery of a former judicial officer." She addressed Douglas directly. "Judge Sullivan, I am profoundly disturbed by your apparent involvement in this matter. You will make yourself available to investigators, and I strongly suggest you retain counsel immediately." As the gavel fell, Bryce felt no triumph, only grim satisfaction. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. His daughter would be safe tonight. But his vengeance was just beginning. Chapter 6: The Architect's Revenge. With Abby safely returned to him, Bryce's focus shifted to the next phase of his plan: systematic retribution against those who had betrayed him. His daughter's well-being remained his priority, but in the quiet hours after she was asleep, he worked to dismantle the lives of those who had tried to destroy his. For Abby, he created stability and safety. He hired Teresa Alvarez, a kind but no-nonsense nanny with impeccable credentials and experience helping children through family trauma. He enrolled Abby with a legitimate therapist, Dr. Keisha Williams, who specialized in parental alienation cases. Slowly, Abby began to heal. The nightmares decreased. She spoke more openly about what had happened at her grandmother's house, the fighting she'd witnessed, the confusing questions at Dr. Montgomery's office, the way her mother and grandmother had coached her on what to say about her father. "Daddy, are Mommy and Dustin going to jail?" she asked one evening as he tucked her in. "I don't know, Princess. But what's important is that you're safe now, and you don't have to worry about any of that." Grandma Patricia said you paid the judge to take me away from Mommy. Bryce controlled the flash of anger. That's not true, Abby. The judge made her decision based on what was best for you. Grandma Patricia shouldn't be telling you things like that. I know. Abby's voice was small. She tells a lot of lies. The next morning, Bryce called his attorney. I want a petition for supervised visitation only for Patricia Lynch. And I want to record every visit. Already working on it, Marianne assured him. The DA's office is moving forward with charges against Nicole and Dr. Montgomery for perjury and fabricating evidence. They're still investigating your father for the bribery angle, but those cases are more complex. What about Dustin? Nothing criminal yet, but the documentation of his behavior around Abby has been added to the CPS file. If Nicole pursues custody again, it will be a significant factor. Bryce ended the call, satisfied with the legal progress, but knowing it wasn't enough. The courts might deliver some justice, but not the reckoning he had planned. For Dustin Mercer, destruction came swiftly. Ray Dominguez had connections throughout the local business community. Anonymous tips to the health department resulted in surprise inspections of CrossFit Revolution, uncovering numerous code violations. Dustin's past DUI and child support delinquency were anonymously reported to the Fitness Certification Board, resulting in a review of his instructor credentials. Most devastating was the mass exodus of clients after printed photos of Dustin's drunken rage, captured by Leonard's surveillance, mysteriously appeared in every member's mailbox, along with copies of the restraining order his previous girlfriend had filed. Within a month, Dustin's business was hemorrhaging clients and drowning in fines. By the 6th week, a for-lease sign appeared in the window of CrossFit Revolution. For Dr. Vivian Montgomery, professional ruin came through official channels. Bryce's complaint to the state psychology board detailed her unethical conduct, practicing without proper documentation, falsifying treatment records, and failing to disclose her personal relationship with Nicole. The board suspended her license pending investigation, and her carefully cultivated reputation collapsed as news of the scandal spread through professional circles. Nicole faced both legal and social destruction. The criminal charges for perjury and attempted fraud carried potential jail time, but Bryce ensured her suffering extended beyond the courtroom. Through carefully cultivated channels, the details of her affair, the false abuse allegations, and her attempt to bribe a former judge became common knowledge in their social circle. Former friends cut ties, real estate clients disappeared, and her professional network evaporated overnight. For Douglas Sullivan, Bryce reserved his coldest vengeance. The former judge had spent decades building a reputation for unimpeachable integrity. Now, that legacy lay in ruins as the district attorney investigated the bribery allegations. But Bryce wanted more than legal consequences. He systematically documented his father's history of emotional abuse and neglect, not just toward Bryce, but toward his late mother as well. He located 3 of Douglas's former clerks who had stories of his father's bullying and inappropriate behavior on the bench. Most damning, he uncovered evidence that Douglas had pressured his mother to decline aggressive treatment for her cancer, prioritizing their social calendar over her health. Each piece of information was carefully disseminated to Douglas's former colleagues, his country club friends, the judicial associations where he still held emeritus status. The whispers became a flood, and Douglas Sullivan found himself facing not just potential criminal charges, but complete social ostracism. 2 months after gaining custody of Abby, Bryce received a call from Nicole. "We need to talk," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. In person, they met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. Nicole looked diminished, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes. "How's Abby?" she asked after an awkward silence. "She's doing well. Dr. Williams says she's making excellent progress." Nicole nodded, staring into her untouched coffee. "The DA has offered me a plea deal. 6 months in county jail, 5 years probation. My lawyer says I should take it." "That sounds reasonable." "Reasonable." Nicole's laugh was hollow. "Bryce, my life is destroyed. My career is over. My own mother barely speaks to me since the restraining order you got against her. Dustin's gone, moved back to Houston after his business failed. I have nothing left." "That was your choice," Bryce replied, his voice even. "You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to use our daughter as a weapon against me." "I know. And she swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I got carried away with it all. Dustin convinced me you were controlling, that I deserved better. Then when you found out and threatened to take Abby, I panicked. So this is an apology? Yes. And Nicole hesitated. I'm hoping we can find a way forward. For Abby's sake. Maybe after I serve my time, we could work toward joint custody again? I'm her mother, Bryce. She needs me. Bryce studied her, noting the calculated desperation in her eyes. Even now, she was performing, playing the role of the repentant mother seeking redemption. No, he said simply. No? Just like that. Just like that. You conspired to take my daughter from me using false allegations that could have sent me to prison. You exposed her to an abusive relationship. You manipulated her and traumatized her. There is no coming back from that. People make mistakes, Bryce. I'm still Abby's mother. A mother doesn't use her child as a pawn. A mother doesn't coach her daughter to lie about her father. Bryce leaned forward. You'll serve your sentence. You'll follow whatever visitation the court eventually grants you, which I will fight to keep supervised and minimal. But you will never have custody of Abby again. Not even partial. Tears filled Nicole's eyes. You won't even consider forgiveness? After 10 years of marriage. You didn't just betray our marriage, Nicole. You tried to destroy me completely. And for that, there is no forgiveness. As he stood to leave, Nicole grabbed his wrist. This isn't over. You've taken everything from me, and I have nothing left to lose. Bryce looked down at her hand until she released him. That's where you're wrong. You still have your freedom, limited as it is. You still have the possibility of a relationship with your daughter someday. Those can be taken too, if you force my hand. The threat hung between them, its implications clear. Any further attacks would be met with even greater consequences. Nicole's face crumpled. What happened to you? You used to be a good man. I'm still a good man, Bryce replied. To those who deserve my goodness. To those who betray me, I'm something else entirely. He walked away without looking back, already planning his next moves. The legal battles would continue. The divorce proceedings. The potential criminal trials. But Bryce was patient. The foundation of his new life with Abby was secure, and the ruins of his enemies' lives would serve as a warning to anyone who might threaten them in the future. In his controlled demolition of their lives, Bryce had discovered a terrible truth about himself. Vengeance suited him, and he was just getting started. Chapter 7. Consequences and Calculations. 6 months passed, reshaping the landscape of lives shattered and rebuilt. Bryce and Abby settled into a new rhythm in a different house, a modern structure overlooking the lake, designed by Bryce himself as a symbolic fresh start. The old family home, with its tainted memories, was sold. Abby thrived under the stability Bryce provided. Her nightmares subsided, replaced by excitement about her new school and the horse riding lessons Bryce enrolled her in after Dr. Williams suggested physical activities to rebuild her confidence. The therapist had been right. Abby blossomed around the animals, her natural empathy finding a healthy outlet. On a crisp autumn morning, Bryce received a call from Leonard Watts. You asked me to monitor certain situations, the investigator said without preamble. There's been a development with Douglas Sullivan. Bryce had continued his surveillance of all those who had betrayed him, tracking their downfalls. What kind of development? He suffered a stroke 2 days ago. Currently at Memorial Hospital in the intensive care unit. Prognosis unclear, but the situation appears serious. The news landed with surprising impact. Bryce had orchestrated his father's social and professional destruction with cold efficiency, watching as Douglas's reputation crumbled and former colleagues distanced themselves. The DA's investigation into the bribery allegations had stalled due to insufficient evidence, but the damage to Douglas's standing was irreparable. Is he alone? Bryce asked after a moment. As far as I can tell, no visitors recorded except medical staff. After ending the call, Bryce stood at his office window, watching Abby play with their new golden retriever puppy in the backyard. The simple joy on her face contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his mind. His father was dying, possibly alone. The man who had betrayed him completely, who had testified against him in court, who had accepted a bribe to help steal his daughter, that man was facing his mortality without a soul to stand witness. It should have felt like victory. Instead, a hollow sensation spread through Bryce's chest. That evening, after Abby was asleep, he drove to Memorial Hospital. The ICU was quiet, The overhead lights dimmed for the night shift. Douglas Sullivan occupied a private room, his once imposing frame diminished against the white sheets, tubes and wires connecting him to quietly beeping machines. Bryce stood in the doorway, observing the shell of the man who had loomed so large in his life. Douglas's right side appeared slack, his breathing labored even with oxygen assistance. A nurse appeared beside him. "Are you family?" she asked quietly. "I'm his son," Bryce admitted, the words bitter on his tongue. "He's had a significant ischemic stroke. The next 48 hours are critical." She glanced at her tablet. "You're the first visitor he's had. Is he conscious?" "Aware." "Intermittently. We believe he can hear, even when he appears unresponsive." She gestured to the chair beside the bed. "You can sit with him if you'd like." Bryce remained standing after she left, studying the man who had failed him at every critical juncture. As a child seeking approval. As a grieving son when his mother died. As a father fighting for his daughter. "I know you can hear me," Bryce said finally, his voice low. "I want you to know that I succeeded despite you. Abby is safe. She's happy. She's thriving. And she will never know what you did. How you betrayed her father for money. How you were willing to condemn her to an unsafe environment rather than stand up for what was right." Douglas's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. "You'll die alone," Bryce continued, "which is better than you deserve. Your legacy is dismantled. Your reputation destroyed. And when you're gone, no one will mourn the man you truly were. Only the facade you maintained." He stepped closer to the bed, close enough to see the age spots on his father's hands. The translucent quality of his skin stretched over prominent veins. "I didn't come for reconciliation or forgiveness. I came to make sure you know that I won. That your attempt to destroy me failed. That's the last thought I want you to carry into whatever comes next." With that, Bryce turned and walked out, never looking back. He felt no satisfaction, no closure, only a cold certainty that justice had been served. Douglas Sullivan had chosen money over his son and granddaughter. Now he would face death's approach with that knowledge as his only companion. The next development came from an unexpected quarter. Nicole, 3 months into her 6-month jail sentence for perjury and evidence tampering, requested a meeting through her attorney. "She claims to have information vital to your interests," Marianne Keller explained when forwarding the request. "My advice is to ignore it. This woman has proven she'll say or do anything to manipulate a situation." Bryce considered the request for several days before responding. Curiosity ultimately outweighed caution. He arranged to meet Nicole at the county jail, prepared for manipulative tears or desperate bargaining. The woman who sat across from him in the visitation room barely resembled the polished, confident Nicole he had married. Her face was gaunt, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, the institutional jumpsuit hanging loosely on her frame. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice subdued. "I wasn't sure you would. What information do you have that's so vital to my interests?" Bryce asked, dispensing with pleasantries. Nicole glanced at the guard standing near the door, then leaned forward. "It's about Dustin. He's back in town, and he's not stable. Why should that concern me? Because he blames you for everything. His business failing, our relationship ending, his reputation being ruined. He's been making threats." Bryce's expression remained neutral. "Threats against me? Against you and Abby." Nicole's eyes held genuine fear. "I've been getting letters from him. At first, they were about us getting back together after I'm released. Then they turned darker. He talks about making you pay, about taking what you love most. And you're telling me this out of the goodness of your heart." "I'm telling you because whatever else has happened between us, Abby is still my daughter. I don't want her anywhere near him." Nicole pressed her palms flat on the table. "I made terrible mistakes, Bryce. I let ambition and resentment poison everything. But I never wanted Abby to be hurt." Bryce studied her, searching for signs of deception. "These letters, do you still have them?" "My lawyer has copies. I've instructed him to give them to you and to the police." "The police are already involved?" Nicole nodded. "I filed a report last week. They're taking it seriously enough that they've increased patrols near the jail in case he tries to contact me here." The information shifted Bryce's calculated plans. Dustin Mercer had been effectively neutralized, business destroyed, reputation in tatters, financial prospects bleak. Bryce had considered that chapter closed. If Nicole was telling the truth, a new threat had emerged, one directly targeting Abby. "I'll look into it," he said finally. If what you're saying is verified, I'll take appropriate measures. There's something else. Nicole hesitated. When I'm released, I don't plan to contest the custody arrangement. Abby belongs with you. I see that now. I'm going to relocate to Arizona where my cousin lives, try to rebuild some kind of life. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know I'm not a threat to you or Abby anymore. I just want a chance to eventually have some relationship with my daughter, when she's ready and on whatever terms you set. Bryce stood, signaling the end of the conversation. We'll see what the future holds. For now, my priority is ensuring Abby's safety. Keep her safe, Bryce, Nicole said as he turned to leave. Don't let my mistakes cost her anything more. The warning proved prescient. Leonard Watts confirmed Dustin's return to town, staying at a rundown motel on the outskirts. The surveillance photos showed a man transformed by bitterness, unshaven, disheveled, but with the dangerous intensity of someone with nothing left to lose. The letters Nicole had mentioned were equally disturbing. What began as desperate pleas for reconciliation devolved into rambling manifestos of blame, with Bryce cast as the villain who had engineered their downfall. The final letters contained explicit threats, including detailed descriptions of Bryce's daily routine with Abby, the school drop-offs, the weekend trips to the park, the Tuesday afternoon ice cream ritual after therapy. Dustin had been watching them. Bryce implemented immediate security measures. He hired personal protection for Abby, ex-military professionals disguised as an additional nanny and a groundskeeper. He installed enhanced security systems at their home and coordinated with Abby's school to restrict access and pickup authorization. What he didn't do was involve the police beyond reviewing Nicole's report. Bryce preferred to handle threats directly, maintaining control of the situation rather than surrendering it to unpredictable official channels. Ray Dominguez voiced concerns when Bryce outlined his plan. This isn't like ruining someone's business, man. If this guy's unstable, let the cops handle it. The police will arrest him after he does something. I'm not willing to take that risk. So what's your play? You're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you? Bryce's expression was unreadable. Nothing illegal. Nothing that would risk what I've built with Abby. But I'm not going to live looking over my shoulder either. The trap Bryce designed was elegant in its simplicity. Using Leonard's surveillance, he established Dustin's patterns. The bar he frequented every evening, his morning coffee routine, his tendency to circle Bryce's neighborhood at specific times. Through carefully orchestrated coincidences, Bryce allowed Dustin to believe he had discovered Abby's horseback riding lessons at a stable outside town. The isolated location, the predictable schedule, the apparent vulnerability, it was bait designed specifically for a predator looking for an opportunity. On a crisp Saturday morning, Dustin took it. The stable was quiet when Dustin arrived, parking his battered pickup in the gravel lot. From his vantage point, he could see Bryce helping Abby mount a gentle palomino, the stable hand holding the horse's bridle, no other riders in sight. What he couldn't see was Leonard Watts positioned in the hayloft with a camera documenting every move, or Ray and two of his most trusted crew members stationed strategically around the perimeter, or the panic button on Bryce's watch that would bring them all running at the slightest sign of trouble. Dustin approached cautiously, keeping to the shadows of the barn. His hand drifted periodically to his jacket pocket, a gesture that raised Bryce's alertness to high vigilance. The confrontation, when it came, was both more and less than Bryce had anticipated. Sullivan, Dustin called, stepping into the open arena as Abby was completing her circuit on the horse. Bryce turned, positioning himself between Dustin and his daughter. Abby, stay on butterscotch. Jennifer, please take her to the far end of the arena. His voice was calm, but left no room for argument. The stable hand, one of the security professionals Bryce had hired, smoothly led the horse away, engaging Abby in animated conversation about proper posting technique to distract her. You've got some nerve showing up where my daughter rides, Bryce said, advancing toward Dustin with measured steps. Dustin's eyes were bloodshot, his movements jerky. You took everything from me. You took it from yourself when you decided to sleep with my wife and abuse my daughter. Abuse. Dustin gave a harsh laugh. I raised my voice a few times. That's not abuse. The bruises on her arm tell a different story. So does the psychological evaluation. Dustin's hand moved to his pocket again. You think you're so perfect. The great Bryce Sullivan, master builder, perfect father. But you're just controlling. Manipulative. Nicole saw through you. Everyone will eventually. Is that what you came to tell me? That I'm a bad person? Message delivered. Now leave, before I have you removed. Removed? Dustin's laugh held an edge of hysteria. You don't give the orders anymore. You don't get to win every time. His hand emerged from his pocket holding not a weapon, but a phone. I've been documenting everything. Your security goons following me. The way you've isolated Abby from her mother. The bribes you must have paid to get custody. I'm going to expose you. Mr. Mercer. The voice came from behind him. A sheriff's deputy emerged from the stable, followed by another. We've received reports of trespassing and possible stalking. I'm going to need you to step over here with me. Dustin's face contorted with rage. You set me up. You set yourself up, Bryce replied evenly. Following a child to her riding lessons? Threatening her father? What exactly did you think would happen? As the deputies approached, Dustin lunged toward Bryce. This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't. He never finished the sentence. The deputies intercepted him, taking him to the ground with practiced efficiency. The search revealed no weapons, only the phone with its delusional evidence and a flask of whiskey. As they led Dustin away, Bryce returned to Abby, who watched the scene with wide eyes. Daddy? Was that Mommy's friend? The one who yells. Bryce knelt beside the horse, meeting his daughter's gaze. Yes, Princess. But he won't be bothering us anymore. Are you okay? Abby nodded solemnly. I didn't like him. He was mean. I know. But you don't have to worry about him now. Bryce stroked the horse's neck. Do you want to continue your lesson? Or would you rather go get ice cream? Ice cream, Abby decided. And can we visit Mommy tomorrow? I made her a card in art class. The request caught Bryce off guard. Abby had shown little interest in visiting Nicole during her incarceration, still processing the confusion and betrayal of the past months. If that's what you want, Princess, I'll arrange it. Later that evening, after Abby was asleep, Bryce sat in his office reviewing the security footage from the stable. Dustin's face twisted with hatred. The phone brandished like a weapon. The swift intervention by law enforcement. The violation of the restraining order, combined with the documented stalking and threatening behavior, would likely send Dustin to jail for at least a year. More importantly, it cemented the narrative Bryce had carefully constructed. Nicole and Dustin were unstable threats, while he was the protective father Abby needed. His phone rang, Leonard Watts with an update. Douglas Sullivan passed 20 minutes ago. The hospital tried reaching you as his emergency contact. Bryce absorbed the news with unexpected emotion, not grief, exactly, but a complex finality. Thank you for letting me know. There's something else. Patricia Lynch has been trying to contact you. She left messages with your office saying it's urgent regarding Abby. What about Abby? She wouldn't say specifically, just that she has critical information that you need to hear. Bryce considered the possibilities. Patricia had been as complicit as Nicole in the attempted character assassination, perhaps more so given her influence over her daughter. The restraining order keeping her from unsupervised contact with Abby remained in force, despite her numerous petitions to have it lifted. I'll deal with it tomorrow, Bryce decided, after I've arranged my father's affairs. The next day brought the surreal experience of planning Douglas Sullivan's funeral, a small, subdued affair befitting a man whose reputation had collapsed in his final months. The few who attended were distant relatives or former colleagues who came more out of obligation than affection. Bryce gave no eulogy. He stood silent as the minister spoke platitudes about a man he had clearly never truly known. When it was over, Bryce declined the traditional gathering afterward, instead returning to his office to address Patricia Lynch's urgent messages. Her voice when she answered his call was brittle with animosity. Finally decided I was worth speaking to? You claim to have critical information about my daughter, Bryce replied, bypassing the hostility. What is it? Not over the phone. This needs to be in person. That's not possible. The restraining order can be temporarily suspended for an emergency discussion. I've already checked with my attorney. Bryce's patience thinned. Patricia, either tell me what this is about, or I'm ending this call. A pause. Then, Abby's been drawing disturbing pictures in her sessions with Dr. Williams. Pictures that concern me greatly. Dr. Williams shares all relevant information with me. There have been no concerning drawings. Are you certain about that? Because Nicole received a very different update during her last parent consultation. The claim gave Bryce pause. Nicole's limited contact with Abby included monthly supervised therapy sessions where Dr. Williams provided updates on Abby's progress. If Patricia was telling the truth, the therapist was sharing different information with each parent, a serious ethical breach. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you that Abby is showing signs of distress that you're either ignoring or being kept from seeing. As her grandmother, I have a right to be concerned. You forfeited any rights when you participated in a conspiracy to separate Abby from her father through false accusations. Patricia's voice hardened. I did what I thought was best for my granddaughter at the time, based on what Nicole told me. I've admitted I was wrong about some things, but I'm not wrong about this. Bryce weighed his options. Patricia was manipulative and had proven herself willing to lie. But if there was even a possibility that something was being hidden regarding Abby's welfare, he needed to investigate. One meeting, he conceded. At my lawyer's office, with Dr. Williams present. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll be there, Patricia said, an unsettling note of triumph in her voice. And Bryce, you might want to prepare yourself. The truth isn't always what we want it to be. The cryptic warning lingered with Bryce throughout the night, disrupting his usual pragmatic thought processes. What could Patricia possibly know that warranted such confidence? What had Abby drawn that caused such concern? By the time he arrived at Marianne Keller's office the following afternoon, his patience was stretched thin. Patricia was already there, sitting rigidly in the conference room, a manila folder placed precisely in front of her. Dr. Williams had also arrived, her professional demeanor intact, but her expression guarded. Thank you all for coming, Marianne began, taking charge of the meeting. Mrs. Lynch has requested this discussion regarding concerns about Abby's therapy progress. Dr. Williams has agreed to attend in the interest of transparency. Let's not waste time with pleasantries, Patricia said. I'll get straight to the point. She opened the folder and slid several papers across the table. These are copies of drawings Abby has made during her therapy sessions over the past month. Bryce examined the pages, childish crayon drawings that seemed innocuous at first glance. A house, a girl with a horse, a family scene. I don't see anything concerning here, he said, looking up. Look closer at the family drawing. Patricia instructed, her voice tight. Bryce returned his attention to the picture. It showed 3 figures, a tall man labeled Daddy, a small girl labeled Me, and a woman with an angry red face labeled New Nanny Teresa. Abby's drawing Teresa with an angry face, Patricia pointed out. And if you look at her other recent drawings, there's a pattern of adult female figures depicted as threatening or scary. Dr. Williams cleared her throat. I should clarify that while Abby has expressed some adjustment issues with Teresa, these drawings by themselves don't indicate abuse or serious distress. Children often process new authority figures through art in ways that can appear concerning without context. And why wasn't I informed about these drawings? Bryce asked. Because they're part of an ongoing assessment, Dr. Williams explained. I don't report every drawing or statement to parents unless I see a pattern indicating actual risk. You reported them to Nicole, Patricia interjected. I provided a general update on Abby's progress, which included mentioning that she was using art to process changes in her home environment. I did not specifically identify these drawings as concerning. Bryce studied the therapist carefully. Is there anything about Teresa's interactions with Abby that worries you professionally? No, Dr. Williams said firmly. Abby is making excellent progress overall. She's processing significant trauma and adjusting to major life changes. Some resistance to new authority figures is normal and expected. Patricia's expression hardened. So you're dismissing clear warning signs because they don't fit your narrative? Just like everyone dismissed Abby's drawings of Dustin because they didn't fit Nicole's narrative. The comparison struck home, forcing Bryce to consider an uncomfortable possibility. Was he, in his determination to protect Abby and punish those who had wronged them, overlooking something important? Dr. Williams, he said carefully, I want complete transparency. If there's any concern, any at all, about Abby's well-being with Teresa or anyone else, I need to know. Mr. Sullivan, I assure you, if I had any legitimate concerns about Abby's safety or well-being, I would have reported them immediately, regardless of the circumstances. The therapist's gaze was steady. These drawings reflect a child working through complex emotions. They are not, in my professional opinion, indicators of abuse or serious distress. Patricia scoffed. Your professional opinion seems remarkably aligned with whatever Bryce wants to hear. Mrs. Lynch, Marianne interjected. Accusations against Dr. Williams' professional integrity are both inappropriate and potentially actionable. I'm not making accusations, Patricia shot back. I'm stating facts. Abby is showing signs of distress in her new environment, and everyone is rushing to dismiss them just like they rushed to embrace her drawings about Dustin. Bryce had heard enough. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to speak with Teresa directly about Abby's feelings toward her. I'm going to review the full context of these therapy sessions with Dr. Williams. And I'm going to ensure my daughter's well-being as I have consistently done since gaining custody. He fixed Patricia with a cold stare. What I will not do is allow you to manufacture another crisis to manipulate the situation. Your daughter tried that strategy and is currently serving time for it. This isn't manipulation. This is genuine concern for my granddaughter. Your concern would be more credible if you hadn't participated in a conspiracy to separate Abby from her father through false accusations. Bryce echoed his earlier words deliberately. You've demonstrated that you'll lie, manipulate, and disregard Abby's best interests if it serves your agenda. That's not true. I love Abby. Love isn't enough, Bryce replied, gathering the drawings and standing. Trust is required too, and you've destroyed any trust one might have had in your motives or judgment. As he left the conference room, he heard Patricia's voice break. You've taken everyone from me, my daughter, my granddaughter. You won't even let Douglas rest in peace. When does your revenge end, Bryce? When is it enough? He didn't answer. The question lingered with him, however, as he drove home through streets darkening with approaching rain. When was it enough? Where was the line between justice and obsession? The conversation with Teresa that evening confirmed Dr. Williams' assessment. Abby was indeed struggling with accepting Teresa's authority in certain situations, particularly bedtime routines that had previously been Nicole's domain. The nanny had been documenting these challenges appropriately and working with Dr. Williams on strategies to help Abby adjust. She's testing boundaries, Teresa explained. It's completely normal after what she's been through. She needs to know that the new adults in her life are consistent and reliable. Bryce watched through the window as Abby played in the yard with the golden retriever puppy, her laughter carrying through the glass. She seemed happy, healthy, secure, a far cry from the frightened, confused child who had returned to him after the custody hearing. His phone rang, Leonard Watts again. Dustin Mercer was denied bail. He'll remain in custody until trial, likely 3 to 4 months from now. Good. Any other developments? Nicole Sullivan has requested another meeting. Says it's about her mother. Bryce frowned. Did she elaborate? Only that it's urgent and related to Abby's well-being. The timing seemed suspicious, coming immediately after Patricia's failed attempt to raise concerns. Was this another coordinated effort to undermine his custody? I'll think about it, Bryce said, ending the call. Later that night, after Abby was asleep, Bryce sat in his workshop reviewing the security footage from the past week. The cameras around the property showed nothing unusual until he noticed a pattern in Patricia Lynch's car. The silver Honda had driven past the house 3 times in 2 days, slowing each time. The restraining order prohibited Patricia from coming within 500 feet of Abby or their home. These drive-bys, while technically not violating the distance requirement, certainly violated the spirit of the order. Bryce was contemplating his next move when his phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. Mr. Sullivan? This is Officer Ramirez with County Jail. There's been an incident involving Nicole Sullivan. She's asked us to contact you. An hour later, Bryce sat across from Nicole in the jail's medical wing. Her left wrist was bandaged, her face pale but composed. It wasn't a serious attempt, she said before he could ask, gesturing to the bandage. More a cry for help, according to the psychiatrist they made me talk to. Why am I here, Nicole? Because I needed to warn you. My mother isn't stable. She's convinced herself that you've brainwashed Abby, that Teresa is abusing her. She's talking about taking matters into her own hands since the legal system has failed. Bryce's blood went cold. What exactly does that mean? I don't know specifically, but she's been gathering information about Abby's schedule, Teresa's background. She mentioned something about documenting the truth herself. You think she might try to take Abby? Nicole shook her head. Not exactly. I think she might try to create evidence against Teresa. fabricate abuse claims, coach Abby during supervised visits, plant something incriminating. She's desperate, Bryce. She's lost everything, and she blames you entirely. The parallels to Nicole's own earlier actions weren't lost on Bryce. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Nicole's gaze dropped to her bandaged wrist. Because this, all of this, has to stop. The lies, the manipulations, the endless cycle of revenge. Abby deserves better than to be caught in the middle of it for the rest of her childhood. She looked up, her eyes clear for perhaps the first time since their marriage had begun to crumble. I've accepted my responsibility for what happened. I'm serving my time. When I get out, I'm leaving town as I promised. But my mother won't let go. She can't accept that we were wrong. Bryce studied her, searching for signs of deception and finding none. What do you suggest I do? Get Abby away for a while. Take her on a trip, somewhere my mother won't expect. Give me time to convince her to stop this crusade before she does something that will land her in the cell next to mine. It was good advice, regardless of whether Nicole's concern was genuine. Bryce had been planning a vacation for Abby's upcoming school break anyway. A cabin in the mountains where they could hike, fish, and continue healing away from the reminders of the past year's turmoil. I appreciate the warning, he said finally. Are you getting the help you need? He gestured toward her wrist. A ghost of a smile crossed Nicole's face. I am actually. Turns out rock bottom has some benefits. No more pretending. No more facades. Bryce stood to leave, then hesitated. Abby asks about you. She made you a card. Nicole's composure cracked, tears welling in her eyes. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'm working hard to be better. I will. As Bryce left the jail, he felt an unexpected weight lifting. Not forgiveness. He would never forgive Nicole's betrayal, but perhaps something like closure. The battles were ending, one by one. His enemies defeated, not just through his deliberate vengeance, but through the natural consequences of their own actions. Douglas was dead. Dustin was imprisoned. Nicole was incarcerated and had apparently found some measure of genuine remorse. Only Patricia remained, a final loose end in the tapestry of betrayal. And for her, Bryce had one last lesson to deliver. Chapter 8, The Final Reckoning. The mountain cabin was everything Bryce had hoped for. Rustic yet comfortable, surrounded by towering pines and meadows bursting with wildflowers. Abby took to the wilderness with characteristic enthusiasm, delighting in spotting deer at dawn and learning to fish in the crystal-clear lake. Away from the tensions of the past year, both father and daughter found space to breathe, to laugh, to heal. Abby spoke more openly about her confusion during the custody battle, the pressure she'd felt from her grandmother and mother to say bad things about Daddy, the frightening moments witnessing Dustin's drunken rages. Grandma Patricia told me it was our secret. She confided one evening as they roasted marshmallows over the fire pit. She said if I told you what Dustin did, they'd take me away forever and I'd never see you again. Bryce maintained his composure despite the rage that flared at this new revelation. You know that wasn't true, right? You can always tell me anything, and no one can take you away from me. Abby nodded, her face serious in the firelight. I know that now. Dr. Williams says it's not my fault that grown-ups lied. She's right. None of this was your fault, princess. Not one bit. Their 2 weeks in the mountains passed too quickly. As they prepared to return to reality, Bryce received updates from Leonard Watts, who had maintained surveillance on Patricia Lynch in their absence. The news was concerning. Patricia had indeed been documenting Abby's routines, photographing the house, and making contact with several of Abby's school friends' parents. Most troubling, she had been observed meeting with a man Leonard identified as a former private investigator with a reputation for operating in ethical gray areas. She appears to be building towards something, Leonard concluded. Though what exactly, I can't determine without more invasive surveillance. The night before their planned return, Bryce made a decision. Instead of heading home, they would detour to a lakeside resort 3 hours away. The unexpected change would buy him time to address the Patricia situation definitively. Abby was delighted by the surprise extension of their vacation. Can we go swimming every day? And ride the paddle boats? Absolutely, Bryce promised. We can do whatever you want. While Abby explored the resort's playground the next afternoon, Bryce implemented the next phase of his plan. First, a call to Ray Dominguez to arrange for additional security measures at their home. Then, a carefully worded email to Patricia Lynch from an anonymous account. I know what you're planning regarding Abby Sullivan. Evidence has been secured and will be provided to law enforcement if you proceed. This is your only warning." The response came faster than expected. Patricia calling Bryce's cell phone directly, her voice tight, with barely controlled fury. "Where is she? Where's Abby?" "Safe," Bryce replied. "Away from whatever scheme you've been developing." "I don't know what you're talking about. I just want to see my granddaughter." The surveillance photos suggest otherwise. The meetings with Harlan Drake, the documented stalking of our home, the contact with Abby's schoolmates' parents, that goes well beyond wanting a visit. Patricia's sharp intake of breath confirmed he'd struck home. "You've been spying on me? Protecting my daughter from someone who's already participated in one conspiracy to separate us. What exactly were you planning, Patricia? Another false abuse allegation? Fabricated evidence against Teresa? You think you know everything," Patricia hissed. "You think you've won completely. But you haven't seen what I have. You haven't heard what Abby tells me during our supervised visits." "Abby hasn't seen you in over a month," Bryce pointed out. "Your last supervised visit was canceled because you showed up intoxicated. One mistake. One time. After everything you've taken from me." "What I've taken?" Bryce's voice remained controlled despite his rising anger. "You conspired with Nicole and my father to destroy me with false accusations. You coached my daughter to lie about me. You supported a relationship that exposed Abby to verbal and physical abuse. And you're still trying to manipulate the situation for your own benefit. For Abby's benefit. Everything I've done has been for her." "No, Patricia. Everything you've done has been for your own need to control the situation. Just like Nicole. Just like my father. None of you ever considered what was best for Abby. Only what served your own interests." He could hear Patricia's ragged breathing on the line. "You want to know what I was planning? I was going to expose you for what you really are, a vindictive, controlling man who's systematically destroyed everyone around him in the name of justice. I've been gathering testimony from people who've seen how you operate, how you crushed Dustin's business, how you engineered Douglas's social downfall. And you think that would help you gain access to Abby? Attacking her father, the one person who's provided stability through all this chaos. The courts need to see the whole picture. They need to understand that you're not the saint you pretend to be." Bryce allowed a moment of silence before responding. "Here's what's going to happen next, Patricia. I'm filing for a permanent restraining order against you, based on the evidence of your stalking and conspiracy to interfere with my custody. I'm providing the surveillance records to the district attorney, who's already handling Nicole's case, and will likely view this as part of an ongoing criminal conspiracy." "You can't do that. I'm her grandmother. Being a grandmother isn't a right, it's a privilege. One you've forfeited through your actions." Patricia's voice cracked. "Please, Bryce. She's all I have left." For an instant, Bryce felt the weight of her desperation, the same desperate love for Abby that drove his own actions. But he remembered, too, the manipulation, the lies, the willingness to sacrifice Abby's well-being for her own agenda. "You should have thought of that before you tried to destroy her father," he said finally. "Goodbye, Patricia." He ended the call and blocked her number. Another chapter closed, another threat neutralized. The cycle of vengeance was nearly complete. That evening, as Abby slept peacefully in their resort suite, Bryce received a call from the district attorney's office. Patricia Lynch had been arrested attempting to break into Bryce's home. The police had found lockpicking tools, a disposable camera, and printed instructions on how to plant evidence to suggest child abuse. She claimed she was just trying to gather evidence of unsafe conditions for her granddaughter, the DA explained. "But given the restraining order and her prior involvement in Ms. Sullivan's case, we're treating this very seriously." "What charges is she facing?" "Breaking and entering, violation of a restraining order, conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly attempted kidnapping, depending on what the full investigation reveals. Given her age and lack of prior criminal record, she might avoid significant jail time, but the legal consequences will be substantial." After the call ended, Bryce stood at the window overlooking the moonlit lake, processing the finality of what had occurred. Everyone who had betrayed him had now faced justice. Douglas dead, Nicole imprisoned and planning to leave town upon release. Dustin awaiting trial, his reputation and business destroyed. And now Patricia arrested, her desperate final gambit having backfired completely. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Bryce felt a strange emptiness. The vengeance that had driven him for the past year had been executed precisely as planned. His enemies were vanquished. Abby was safe, yet the satisfaction he had anticipated remained elusive. The next morning, watching Abby build an elaborate sand castle on the resort's beach, Bryce considered what came next. The focused intensity of his revenge had provided clarity of purpose during the darkest period of his life. Without it, what would define him now? The answer came in Abby's delighted laugh as a small wave lapped at her creation, partially collapsing a turret. Instead of crying, she immediately began rebuilding, improving on the original design. That was the path forward. Not destruction, but creation. Not vengeance, but rebuilding. The lessons would not be forgotten. Trust once broken would never be fully restored. Betrayal would never be forgiven. But the energy that had fueled his retribution could now be channeled toward constructing a new life for himself and his daughter. 3 days later, they returned home. The house had been swept for any evidence of Patricia's attempted break-in, security systems upgraded, and normalcy restored. As Abby settled back into her routine, Bryce focused on the future, expanding Sullivan Construction into new markets, designing a community playground in Abby's name, establishing a scholarship fund for children from single-parent households. Nicole was released from jail 2 months later. True to her word, she moved to Arizona without attempting to contest the custody arrangement. Her monthly video calls with Abby were supervised by Dr. Williams, who reported steady improvement in their interactions. Dustin Mercer accepted a plea deal for stalking and violating the restraining order, serving 14 months before being released on probation that prohibited him from returning to the state. He disappeared from their lives completely, a footnote in a story that had moved on without him. Patricia Lynch received 3 years probation and mandatory psychiatric treatment. The court upheld the permanent restraining order Bryce had requested, effectively removing her from Abby's life for the foreseeable future. 1 year to the day after the courtroom revelation that had turned the custody battle in his favor, Bryce stood in his newly completed office building downtown. Sullivan Construction had doubled in size, its reputation for integrity and innovation stronger than ever. Abby was thriving in school, her therapy sessions reduced to monthly check-ins, her nightmares a distant memory. Ray Dominguez joined him at the window overlooking the city they were helping to build. Who would have thought we'd end up here when we were working for that penny-pinching contractor all those years ago? Bryce smiled. You did. You always said we'd run this town someday. And now we do. Ray studied his friend's profile. Are you happy, boss? After everything. The question gave Bryce pause. Happiness had seemed an impossible luxury during the darkest days of the custody battle and its aftermath. His focus had been on survival, on justice, on protection, not on his own emotional state. But now, with the wars won and peace restored, he could recognize the contentment that had gradually replaced the burning rage. It wasn't the carefree happiness of his life before Nicole's betrayal. It was something deeper, more resilient, a hard-earned satisfaction built on the knowledge that he had protected what mattered most and emerged stronger from the crucible. I'm good, he said finally. Abby's happy. The business is thriving. That's enough. Ray nodded, understanding what remained unspoken. Some wounds never healed completely. Some betrayals forever altered the landscape of a life. Bryce would never again be the man who trusted easily or forgave readily. The ruthlessness that had served him in his campaign of vengeance remained, tempered now but never eliminated, a weapon sheath but always available. His phone chimed with a text from Teresa. Abby had received an A on her science project and wanted to celebrate with ice cream. The simple normality of it, a child's achievement, a small reward, represented everything he had fought to preserve. Duty calls, he said to Ray with a genuine smile. Abby's waiting. As he drove home, Bryce reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The betrayals, the revelations, the calculated vengeance, the restoration. Through it all, his unwavering focus on protecting his daughter had been his North Star, guiding every decision, justifying every action no matter how harsh. He had lost his wife, his father, relationships he had once valued, but he had kept what mattered most, Abby's safety and their bond. And he had learned a fundamental truth about himself. When protecting what he loved, there were no limits to what he would do, no measures too extreme, no vengeance too complete. It was a truth his enemies had learned too late. A truth that would define him for the rest of his life. A truth he could live with. Chapter 9. The Architect's Legacy. 5 years passed, reshaping the landscape of Bryce Sullivan's life. He applied to his construction projects. Abby grew from a traumatized 8-year-old into a confident teenager, her mother's betrayal and the custody battle fading into childhood memories partially healed by time and therapy. Sullivan Construction had expanded across 3 states, its reputation for excellence and integrity making Bryce one of the most sought-after developers in the region. The company's charitable foundation, focused on supporting children from broken homes, had funded therapeutic programs, educational scholarships, and community centers. On the surface, life had moved forward. Beneath that surface, the events of those turbulent years had permanently altered Bryce's approach to trust and relationships. The ruthlessness that had emerged during his campaign of vengeance remained, submerged but never eliminated, a foundational part of who he had become. Nicole maintained minimal contact, limited to monthly video calls with Abby and occasional carefully worded emails regarding their daughter's milestones. She had rebuilt a modest life in Arizona, working in real estate sales and, according to Abby, dating someone new, a relationship she kept scrupulously separate from her interactions with her daughter. Patricia Lynch had violated her probation 3 months after sentencing, attempting to contact Abby through a school friend's parent. The resulting legal consequences had been severe: 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by stricter probation terms that included an ankle monitor and prohibition from entering the county where Bryce and Abby resided. Douglas Sullivan's legacy had been systematically dismantled, his judicial reputation tarnished by the bribery allegations, even though the investigation had officially closed after his death. The Sullivan family name now belonged solely to Bryce and Abby, reclaimed and redefined through their success and resilience. On a crisp autumn morning, Bryce received an unexpected email from Nicole. "I need to speak with you regarding a private matter. No emergency, but time-sensitive. Available for a call this evening?" The request was unusual. Their communications had been strictly limited to Abby-related matters for years, with Nicole careful never to overstep the boundaries Bryce had established. His instinctive suspicion flared, but curiosity prevailed. That evening, after Abby had gone to a friend's house for dinner, Bryce called the number Nicole had provided. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," Nicole began, her voice holding the careful neutrality that characterized their rare interactions. "I wouldn't have reached out if it wasn't important." "What's this about?" Bryce asked, equally reserved. "My mother is dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors are giving her 3 to 6 months." The news landed with unexpected impact. Patricia Lynch had become a peripheral figure in their lives, a cautionary tale rather than an active threat. Her impending death seemed more like the closing of a chapter than a cause for emotion. "I'm sorry to hear that," Bryce said, the social nicety automatic rather than genuine. "She's asked to see Abby before she dies. One visit, supervised however you deem appropriate." The request was precisely what Bryce had anticipated, and his immediate instinct was an unequivocal refusal. Patricia had forfeited any right to Abby's presence through her actions, terminal illness notwithstanding. "Abby hasn't seen her grandmother in 5 years, he pointed out. The last interaction involved Patricia attempting to manipulate her into making false allegations. Why would I expose her to that again, especially with the emotional manipulation a deathbed visit would entail? "I understand your perspective," Nicole replied, her tone remaining neutral. "And I'm not advocating either way. I promised my mother I would ask, and I'm fulfilling that promise. The decision is entirely yours, as Abby's primary guardian." The lack of pressure was unexpected, almost disconcerting. The Nicole of years past would have employed emotional leverage, veiled threats, manipulative arguments. This matter-of-fact delivery suggested a genuine evolution, or a more sophisticated strategy. Has Patricia expressed any remorse for her actions? Any acknowledgement of the harm she caused? A pause. Yes and no. She still believes she was acting in Abby's best interests, but she regrets the methods she employed. The desperation, the illegal actions. She's had 5 years of therapy to process her role in what happened. "And what's your position on this request?" "Honestly, I'm conflicted. My mother is dying, and that's painful regardless of our complicated history. Part of me wants to grant her dying wish. Another part recognizes that Abby's well-being has to be the priority, and reopening old wounds might not serve that. The balanced response further indicated Nicole's growth, or her awareness that manipulation would be immediately recognized and rejected. "I'll need to think about it," Bryce said finally. "And if I consider it at all, I'll need to discuss it with Dr. Williams regarding potential impacts on Abby." "That's fair. Thank you for even considering it." Nicole hesitated. "There's one other matter. My mother has prepared letters for Abby to be delivered in the event you decide against a visit. Would you be willing to review them first and pass them along if appropriate?" "I'll review them," Bryce agreed. No promises beyond that. After ending the call, Bryce stood at his office window, watching the sunset paint the skyline in shades of orange and purple. The request had disturbed the carefully maintained equilibrium of his life, forcing him to confront questions he had set aside years ago. When did vengeance become cruelty? At what point did protection become control? Where was the line between justified caution and punitive isolation? Dr. Williams, now in private practice but still serving as Abby's occasional counselor, provided her professional perspective during their consultation the following day. "Abby has processed much of the trauma from that period," she observed. "She understands what happened in age-appropriate terms, and she's developed healthy coping mechanisms. The question isn't whether she's strong enough to handle seeing her grandmother, but whether there's any benefit to doing so." "And is there?" Bryce asked. "Potentially. Closure can be valuable, even with relationships that have been harmful. But it depends entirely on Patricia's current state of mind and Abby's own wishes." "How do I determine Abby's wishes without unduly influencing her?" "She knows the general outline of what happened, but not the specifics of Patricia's actions." Dr. Williams considered this. "Present it as neutrally as possible. Her grandmother is very ill and would like to see her. Acknowledge their complicated history without editorializing. Then listen, really listen, to Abby's response." The conversation with Abby that evening was more revealing than Bryce had anticipated. His daughter, now 13 and increasingly perceptive, absorbed the information with a thoughtfulness that made him both proud and slightly unsettled. "Grandma Patricia is the one who tried to take me away from you, right? During the bad time?" "Yes, among other things." Abby nodded slowly. "And now she's dying and wants to see me." "That's correct. But this is entirely your decision, Abby. There's no right or wrong answer." She was quiet for a long moment, petting their golden retriever who had laid his head in her lap. "If I don't see her, will I regret it later? When I'm grown up?" The question revealed a maturity beyond her years, an ability to consider future emotional consequences that Bryce found both impressive and slightly unsettling. "I can't answer that for you," he said honestly. "Regret is a complicated emotion. I can only tell you that whatever you decide, I'll support you completely." Abby looked up at him, her dark eyes, so like his own, serious and searching. "What would you do if it was your dad asking to see you before he died?" The question struck Bryce with unexpected force. His father had died alone, with Bryce's final words to him being ones of condemnation rather than comfort. Had he regretted that choice in the intervening years? No. The clarity of his answer surprised even him. Douglas Sullivan had betrayed him completely, sacrificing his son and granddaughter for money. Such a betrayal warranted no deathbed reconciliation, no absolution offered in the final hours. "That's a different situation," Bryce said carefully. "The things your grandfather did were more deliberate, more calculated than Patricia's actions." "But you didn't forgive him," Abby pressed. "You didn't go see him at the end." "No, I didn't." "And you don't regret that?" Bryce met his daughter's gaze directly. "No. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, Abby. Some actions have permanent consequences." Abby nodded slowly, processing this. I think I want to see Grandma Patricia. Not because I forgive her, but because I want to understand better what happened. And because I don't want to wonder about it later." Bryce studied his daughter, recognizing in her a strength and clarity of purpose that mirrored his own. "Then we'll arrange it. On our terms, with proper safeguards." The visit was scheduled for the following Sunday, carefully structured, thoroughly supervised, with clear boundaries established in advance. It would take place in Dr. Williams' office rather than the hospital, allowing for a neutral environment and professional oversight. As they drove to the appointment, Abby was unusually quiet, her fingers nervously pleating the edge of her blouse. You can change your mind at any time, Bryce reminded her. If you become uncomfortable, we leave immediately. No questions asked. Abby nodded. I know, Dad. I'm okay. Just thinking about what to say. You don't need to say anything specific. This isn't about making her feel better or giving her closure. It's about what you need. When they arrived, Dr. Williams met them in the waiting area. Patricia is already here, she explained. She understands the parameters we discussed. No manipulative language, no guilt-inducing statements, no undue emotion that might pressure Abby. And if she violates those terms? Bryce asked. The visit ends immediately, Dr. Williams confirmed. I'll be present throughout to intervene if necessary. Patricia Lynch was a shadow of the formidable woman who had testified against Bryce years ago. Cancer had hollowed her cheeks, thinned her once immaculate silver hair, and stooped her shoulders. She sat in an armchair, supported by cushions, an oxygen cannula in her nostrils. When Abby entered the room, Patricia's eyes filled with tears she visibly struggled to contain. Abby, she whispered, you've grown so beautiful. Abby stood slightly behind Bryce, one hand resting on his arm. Hello, Grandma Patricia. Bryce remained positioned between them, unwilling to leave Abby exposed despite Dr. Williams' presence on the other side of the room. Remember our agreement, Patricia? Patricia nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue. I remember. Thank you for bringing her. Abby moved to the chair opposite her grandmother, sitting with perfect posture, a physical manifestation of the emotional boundaries being maintained. Mom says you're very sick. Yes, pancreatic cancer. It's not responding to treatment. I'm sorry about that, Abby said, her voice gentle but not emotional. It must be scary. Patricia's smile was pained. It is, but seeing you helps. The conversation proceeded cautiously, with Patricia asking general questions about Abby's school, activities, and interests. Abby answered politely but without elaboration, maintaining a careful distance. Bryce watched every moment, alert for any attempt at manipulation or inappropriate emotional leverage. 30 minutes into the visit, Patricia set aside the pretense of casual conversation. Abby, I want you to know how sorry I am for what happened when you were younger. I made terrible mistakes. Abby glanced at Bryce, who nodded slightly. This was the moment they had prepared for, the inevitable apology that might or might not be genuine. What mistakes? Abby asked, direct and unflinching. Patricia seemed taken aback by the question. I tried to separate you from your father. I believed things that weren't true, and I did things I shouldn't have. Why? The simple question hung in the air. Patricia looked to Dr. Williams, then back to Abby. I thought I was protecting you. I was wrong, desperately wrong. But at the time, I truly believed your father was dangerous to you and your mother. He never hurt me, Abby said firmly. Never. But I remember being scared at your house. I remember Dustin yelling and breaking things. I remember you telling me to lie. Patricia flinched as if struck. Abby, it's okay. Abby interrupted, her voice steady. I'm not angry anymore. I just wanted you to know that I remember the truth, and that I'm happy with my dad. He's a good father. The simple declaration brought unexpected emotion to Bryce's throat. After everything, the custody battle, the false accusations, the years of rebuilding, his daughter's clear-eyed assessment of his parenting was perhaps the only vindication that truly mattered. Patricia nodded, tears streaming freely now. I can see that, and I'm glad. Despite everything that happened between your father and me, I only ever wanted you to be safe and loved. I am, Abby confirmed. Very much. As the visit concluded, Patricia reached into a small bag beside her chair. I brought something for you. Your father can check it first, of course. She handed Bryce a small, carefully wrapped package. He opened it cautiously, revealing an antique silver locket. It belonged to my grandmother, Patricia explained. I'd always planned to give it to Abby when she was older. Inside is a picture of her great-grandmother, a remarkable woman who would have been proud of the young lady Abby is becoming. Bryce examined the locket carefully before passing it to Abby. Thank you, she said, studying the delicate silver work. It's beautiful. You don't have to wear it, Patricia said quickly. I just wanted you to have something from your maternal family history. Abby smiled, a genuine expression for the first time during the visit. I'd like to wear it. Thank you, Grandma Patricia. As they prepared to leave, Patricia addressed Bryce directly. Thank you for bringing her. I know it couldn't have been an easy decision. Bryce nodded, maintaining the careful neutrality he'd held throughout the visit. He had facilitated this meeting for Abby's benefit, not Patricia's, a distinction he wanted absolutely clear. Patricia seemed to understand. I know you'll never forgive me, Bryce. I wouldn't expect you to, but I hope you believe that I truly regret the pain I caused, especially to Abby. What I believe doesn't matter anymore, Bryce replied. What matters is that Abby is thriving, and that no one will ever again use her as a pawn in adult conflicts. It was neither forgiveness nor absolution, but it was the closest thing to peace Patricia would receive from him. She accepted it with a slight nod before turning her attention back to Abby for a final goodbye. In the car afterward, Abby was thoughtful, turning the silver locket over in her hands. That was harder than I expected, she admitted. You handled it beautifully, Bryce assured her. I'm proud of you. Dad, do you think people can really change? Like, deep down. Bryce considered the question carefully. I think people can learn from their mistakes. They can make different choices. But their fundamental nature, what drives them at their core, that rarely changes completely. So you don't think Grandma Patricia has changed? I think she regrets the consequences of her actions. Whether that's the same as true change, I'm not certain. Abby was quiet for a moment. I think I'm glad we went. But I don't think I need to see her again. That's entirely your decision, Princess. No right or wrong answer. You never saw Grandpa Douglas again after everything happened. No, I didn't. And Mom, will you ever forgive her? The question was one Abby had never asked directly before. Bryce had maintained a carefully neutral position regarding Nicole and Abby's presence, never denigrating her mother, but never pretending the betrayal hadn't occurred. Your mother and I have reached an understanding, he said carefully. We both want what's best for you. Beyond that, some things can't be undone. Abby nodded, seeming to accept this. I think that's how I feel about Grandma Patricia. I don't hate her, but I can't forget what happened either. That's a very mature perspective. I learned it from you, Abby said simply. The observation resonated with Bryce long after they returned home. His approach to betrayal, the clear-eyed assessment, the refusal to forgive or forget, the response, had been absorbed by his daughter. Not the vengeful aspects, but the underlying principle. Actions had consequences, and some betrayals permanently altered relationships. Patricia Lynch died 6 weeks later. Bryce attended the funeral with Abby, a decision made out of respect for his daughter's wishes rather than any sense of obligation to the deceased. Nicole was there, maintaining a respectful distance from her ex-husband and daughter while acknowledging their presence with a subdued nod. The sparse attendance spoke volumes about Patricia's final years. Her involvement in the custody battle scandal, her criminal conviction, and her subsequent isolation had reduced her social circle to a handful of distant relatives and former colleagues. The woman who had once commanded a room with her imposing presence was eulogized briefly and buried quietly. After the service, Nicole approached them cautiously. Thank you both for coming. It would have meant a lot to her. We came for Abby, Bryce clarified. Nicole nodded, accepting the distinction. Of course. She turned to Abby. How are you holding up, sweetheart? I'm okay, Abby assured her. It's sad, but we did get to say goodbye. A subtle look passed between Bryce and Nicole, an unspoken acknowledgement that they had, despite everything, managed to put their daughter's needs first in this particular instance. I'm heading back to Arizona tomorrow, Nicole said. But I'd like to keep our regular video calls if that's okay with you, Abby. I'd like that, Abby confirmed. As Nicole walked away, Bryce reflected on the complex web of relationships forever altered by betrayal and its aftermath. Nicole would never again be the woman he had trusted with his heart and his future. Patricia had died with the consequences of her actions defining her final years. Douglas had passed alone, his reputation in ruins. Dustin had disappeared, forbidden by court order from ever returning to their lives. And Bryce? He had emerged not unchanged, but strengthened, hardened in some ways, perhaps, but more fiercely protective of what mattered. He had discovered a capacity for ruthlessness he hadn't known he possessed, a willingness to systematically dismantle the lives of those who threatened his family. It was not a comfortable self-knowledge, but it was true, and Bryce Sullivan had long ago committed himself to truth over comfort. 10 years after the custody battle that had defined a turning point in his life, Bryce stood in his office overlooking the city that now bore numerous landmarks of his creation. Sullivan Construction had become Sullivan Development, with projects spanning commercial, residential, and public works. His reputation for uncompromising integrity in business contrasted with whispered rumors about his personal ruthlessness, a dichotomy that served him well in negotiations and partnerships. Abby, now 18 and preparing for college, had grown into a young woman of remarkable strength and clarity. She maintained a cordial but distant relationship with her mother, visiting Nicole in Arizona during select holidays, but firmly establishing Bryce as her primary familial connection. The scars of the past remained, visible in subtle ways. Abby's exceptional perceptiveness about people's motives. Bryce's continued vigilance regarding potential threats. The careful boundaries both maintained in relationships. But these were not weaknesses. They were adaptations, protective mechanisms developed in response to genuine harm. On the evening before Abby was to leave for her first semester at university, they sat on the deck of their lake house, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. "Dad, do you ever wonder how things might have been different? If Mom hadn't," she stopped, rephrasing. "If everything hadn't happened the way it did?" Bryce considered the question. "Sometimes. But I've never found much value in that kind of thinking. What happened, happened. We can't change it, only respond to it." Abby nodded. "One of my psychology books calls that radical acceptance. Acknowledging reality without judgment or resistance. That's a good term for it. But you don't really accept without judgment," Abby observed, her perceptiveness as keen as ever. "You accepted what happened, but you definitely judged everyone involved. And you responded accordingly." Bryce smiled slightly. "Guilty as charged. Perhaps strategic acceptance would be more accurate in my case." Abby laughed. "That sounds about right." Her expression grew more serious. "I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness lately, about whether it's possible to move forward without it. And what have you concluded?" "That forgiveness is overrated," she said frankly. "Or at least, the way people talk about it is. Like it's this magical thing that heals everything. But some things can't be healed. Some betrayals change you forever." "That's true. I don't hate Mom, or Grandma Patricia, or anyone else involved in what happened. But I don't forgive them either. I've accepted it, learned from it, moved beyond it." "Isn't that enough?" Bryce looked at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who had emerged from trauma with such clarity and strength. "More than enough. You don't owe forgiveness to anyone who betrayed your trust so completely. Neither do you, Dad." The simple statement carried a weight of understanding that moved Bryce deeply. Abby had grown up witnessing his uncompromising response to betrayal. Rather than finding it harsh or excessive, she had recognized it as a principled stance, a refusal to pretend that some actions could be forgotten or absolved. "Thank you for that," he said quietly. As the sun slipped below the horizon, Bryce reflected on the path that had brought them here. The custody battle, the systematic vengeance, the careful rebuilding. Throughout it all, his unwavering priority had been protecting Abby and ensuring she grew up with stability, security, and truth. In that, at least, he had succeeded. His daughter was heading into adulthood with a clear-eyed understanding of human nature, a healthy skepticism about easy trust, and the confidence that came from knowing her father would stop at nothing to protect her. The personal cost, the hardening of his heart, the capacity for ruthlessness he had discovered in himself, seemed a reasonable exchange. Bryce Sullivan was not the same man who had discovered his wife's betrayal all those years ago. He was harder now, colder toward those who crossed him, utterly unforgiving of betrayal. But to Abby, he remained the father who had fought for her when everyone else had been willing to sacrifice her well-being for their own agendas. And in the end, that was the only judgment that mattered to him. The architect of vengeance had built something enduring from the ruins of betrayal. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but something stronger, more resilient, a life defined by unwavering principles rather than comfortable illusions. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.